are we rapping and speaking about the violence in our songs because that's what we're living, or is that something that's a consequence of our art form? On this week's episode of the Infusion Breakdown Show, the Breakdown crew sat down with two very special guests, returning guests Antny Rome and Tanner June, to discuss the relationship between life and art, and to what extent one informs the other. Let's see what we come up with. Before we get started on today's episode, I'd like to introduce to you our Black-owned business of the week, where we showcase quality Black-owned businesses for you to support every week. This week's business is Romaniatic by Antny Rome. Rome is a talented graphic designer that's collaborated with Tuesday, as well as Norfolk's very own Green 321, owned by Pusha T. In addition to these projects, Antny Rome is also a gifted logo designer. A logo can either make or break a brand, so with that in mind, be sure to reach out to Rome if you need to take your brand to the next level.
So the question we have for today, does life reflect art or does art reflect life? Comment below, let us know your opinion. Also, today's guests include Antny Rome and Tanner June. Also, we have timestamps in the description below. As always, be sure to check them out.
Cool. So kind of like a preface for today's discussion, I had this question sort of for a little while: does art reflect life or does life reflect art? And I felt it was very relevant given some of the articles that I've been reading recently, and then also what's transpired recently within hip hop with like the recent deaths of a lot of rappers due to either being shot, murdered, or through drugs. And so, one common criticism of hip hop culture and rap music by detractors such as Bill O'Reilly is that it's a negative influence on the youth of the subject matter and the material that it contains. I don't lend too much credence to it myself, but I do want to expand that question to an in-depth analysis that expands across mediums and potentially into other forms of music as well. So, um, are we the way we are because of the media and content that we ingest, absorb, listen to, take in, or is it the inverse of that essentially?
You never cease to amaze because the fact that you started the conversation off with a Bill O'Reilly references. Like, I don't know if I'm the only one that feels some type of way about it, but it's hilarious.
Like, I was just doing a recap of going back and looking at his interactions with certain rappers, like how he got Ludacris out of his Pepsi deal.
Yeah.
Ridiculous.
How do you feel about Bill O'Reilly, Jasmine? You seem like you feel pretty strongly about him.
It's not that I feel strongly. It's just like, it's more or less like a kudos slash, being a little bit facetious to Brian, because he never ceases to amaze like who he brings as a reference to the conversation. Like, I would have never thought, we'd be talking about Bill O'Reilly when it comes to the conversation we're going to have. But, he never ceases to amaze. Like, to answer your question, I can't really give you like a formidable like opinion of him, just because I haven't necessarily seen a lot of his reactions with rappers or artists per se.
To be clear, I guess the Bill O'Reilly was a tie-in that I thought of after the fact, because he's somebody who I guess represents that narrative or that viewpoint of hip hop culture and rap music. But I saw an Ice Cube interview recently. I saw it a while ago, then I saw it again. It was a interview he had done with, I think, Barbara Nevins of CNBC back in the 90s. And so one of the questions that was asked to him by a fan, and then Nevins herself, she had asked, how would you feel if someone heard your music and took it literally from the caller? That's what the guy asked. It was he described himself as a black guy who was in college, he was educated, and he was asking Ice Cube how he would feel in that scenario. Then Nevins herself, she asked the question. And I feel like that interview in itself was a masterclass by Ice Cube of how to explain hip hop culture to people who are uneducated about it, and then I guess disarm some of the detractions from it. And so I thought about some of those detractors that people commonly pick with hip hop music. So the violence, misogyny, drug usage, and I thought also about R&B music too. So I think one of the most prominent ones that I probably want to talk about would be the drug usage, given what we just said. It seems as if there's been a shift from glorifying the drug dealer and its the acquisition of financial prosperity to being more centered around the drug user itself. Like, if you compare the subject matter of Jay-Z, for example, or Biggie to someone like Future or Travis Scott, like, the subject matter that they rap about and the way that they relate to the drugs is totally different. And I came across this article by Dr. CalvinJohn Smiley. It was brilliant. I'm going to add this to the description so people could check it out if they want to. But it's called Addict Rap, and it talks about the relationship between drugs and rap music and how it's evolved over time. And I thought he made a number of brilliant points. And one of the best parts of it is when he started off, he made it very clear for people who were uninformed about hip hop music and coming in as outside perspective, looking in, was that what he's addressing is a subset of the genre. It's not speaking for the totality of hip hop music because they're not synonymous. You can't say that drug music is hip hop. It's not. It's a part of it. And so that's something that those people like Bill O'Reilly, for example, and I guess other people who have a similar mindset, they're quick to lump everything together and then say that hip hop is this negative. They wouldn't even call it an art form, but just this negative portrayal of what people feel.
Before you go on, do you feel you don't feel hip hop is negatively affecting the youth to do these acts such as sell drugs, take drugs, commit violence? You don't believe that?
That's what I kind of wanted to talk about. I broke it into those categories, and I wanted to go through and address them. And some of them, like the one about drug usage in particular, I feel like there's a bit more of a discussion to be had about that one because it's not as clear to me. It appears because this is essentially a new age spin on the chicken versus the egg argument. Like, which came first? Is it? Are we talking about the violence because it are we rapping and speaking about the violence in our songs because that's what we're living, or is that something that's a consequence of our art form? And for the violence, for example, I don't think that's the case because violence has been around since the dawn of man, since man has existed. And then, like, if you think about the misogyny, I mean, let's go back to ancient Greece, for example. The ancient Greeks, had plays in their theaters, and they wouldn't even allow women to portray women on the plays. They had men play those roles. So I think that argument is completely invalid. It's not saying that hip hop has led directly to the inception of misogyny. That's not a thing. I don't feel like it is. And then, well, on the subject of Greek culture, I feel like in Greek mythology, anyone who's read any of that through school or just took a brief interest in it, you can pretty much know for a fact that the gods and goddesses themselves, they were portrayed as not only noble and had admirable characteristics, but they're also very angry, jealous, and had a lot of negative traits too. And so that those were kind of descriptors of human nature. And I feel like mythology itself was used as a way to illustrate phenomenon that we experienced ourselves, but we didn't have thorough explanations for at the time. So as far as violence and misogyny, I don't think that well, to make my stance more clear on that, I think in terms of those two at least, that they are a reflection of how we are and our thoughts. Because, like with the example that I said about the women not being able to portray women inside the Greek plays, that was a direct influence and direct result of the inequality that they felt at that time about the men who didn't want women to be seen in that light. They didn't want them to have that much power. So as a result, the art form was directly influenced. And with the drugs, that's one that I kind of wasn't able to come to a solid consensus about. And I wanted to kind of have more of a conversation with you guys to see if we could kind of make sense of it. Because I do understand that some musicians may have problems like the normal people like us. So they could have drug problems prior to them going into something, or they have existing mental health conditions. And then once they get into um, financial success, then they essentially it becomes an accelerant. They have the means by which to get drugs and do things, and it's almost like that's the worst thing that could possibly happen for them. So, what are you guys' thoughts on specifically? Well, anything that I really just said about those three different subsets of the criticisms of hip hop music, or if you want to just focus on the drugs in particular.
I feel like with hip hop music, I agree with you that violence and misogyny is not created by hip hop music. It's been there long before hip hop music existed. Hip hop music was created from the pain of people, you know. So, like at first, it was just kind of like people expressing their thoughts about what was going on in New York, and then it became like it was like party music, you know, and then it became like more conscientious um, as like drugs fill the street and as police brutality rose, and I think now it's kind of becoming like it's kind of like looping back around, You know, it feels like now like where 90s music was about like the drug dealers, it feels like now it's about the rappers being drug users as well as drug dealers, because like the drugs they're selling are party drugs. So it's like, yeah, they sell it, but they do it too. So I don't think that they're like influencing people to do it because it's already a party drug.
Yeah,
Like,
and a lot of people talk about, like, there's even people who make music about stuff that they have done, not things that they're currently doing.
Yeah.
You know? And I think that goes for a lot of art too. Like, people make stuff inspired by things that have happened. It's not always stuff that's like currently happening. You know, like even people who paint or like who make music or who draw or whatever. Like a lot of the time, you are inspired by stuff that has already happened to you. You know, it doesn't have to be ongoing. Like, especially something like addiction or like drug using or whatever, like that will always affect your life, whether it's currently happening or whether it's not happening anymore, you know?
Yeah, like Jay-Z and like 50 Cent, they're not like out here trapping. Like, you know what I mean? They're like whole fathers and businessmen, you know what I mean? Like, they're
I'm sorry to cut you off. What if the problem is the violence is being glorified by hip hop culture? Like they're making it look cool.
I don't think
Yeah, you say Jay-Z's. Of course, Jay-Z's not rapping about that now. He's actually is rapping about being a father. Like his last actual album, 444, was actually about him cheating on his wife and actually him being a wife and everything, him being a husband and everything like that. So yes, and then 50 Cent doesn't rap because he couldn't stop rapping like that. But yeah, I just wanted to ask how much of that is actually them saying that hip hop glorifies violence, not necessarily that it started it.
I mean, I think like hip hop states like they show the world from, I guess, like a minority point of view, like as we experience it, like the pain, the drugs, the violence, like as we experience it. It just so happens that a lot of the artists that get popular are from the worst parts of America. So like the drugs and the violence is like kind of at the forefront, it seems like, it's along with the pain, but the pain isn't flashy, you know what I mean? The drugs, the guns, the violence, the sex, like that's like flashy.
And I
That's
think
what
a lot
people
of the
focus
time
on.
too, the artist himself is not trying to glorify it; they're just saying it. And I think however people interpret it and take it is kind of what might lead to like people glorifying things like violence and drug use and stuff like that. I mean, drug use is another thing because like people will glorify that, and be like, it's cool to do this and that or whatever. But I think a lot of the time, violence, I feel like.
You don't think violence is glorified?
I mean, like I think like
Yeah,
Hollywood.
and then hold on. Jeff, to your point too about the glorification, like with certain songs, certain artists definitely do glorify the usage of drugs.
Yeah.
Some artists do.
I definitely say catch him with an Uzi, pop 10, some shit like that. I definitely say that in the most conscientious way. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like, you don't feel like they glorify it at all? Because I definitely feel it's definitely glorified to some degree. I definitely feel.
But I feel like it's glorified because it's like a party drug, you know?
You said more violence.
Oh, the violence?
Yeah.
I feel like the violence gets glorified in some ways. I don't think that they make music about violence because it's like cool to do. I think that they like start off making it from like a personal perspective, and then it becomes like what they're known for, their career, and then they just continue making it, like that's what pays the bills at that point. So like it's easy for somebody like Drake to never rap about like drugs or violence because he didn't. He's Drake. Like he didn't blow up off of like talking about like trapping in the street and like like moving drugs or like slinging like whatever. Like it's easier for somebody like Lil Uzi or 21 Savage to talk about that because that's what they blew up off of. Like their music was like when they first came up, like when you first heard them, like it was about guns, like party drugs, like selling drugs, like violence, like women. So now, even though they're not doing that anymore, it's what they're known for. It's like the music that people expect to listen to from them. Or it's like if you look at hip hop as a actual profession, like you would a sport, then you're expecting certain things from the member on your team. You're expecting them to put up certain numbers. You're expecting them to like do certain things on your team. So you're expecting these artists to sell a certain amount. You're expecting certain content from them. That's why you're listening to certain artists because you it's like it's predictable. You know what you're gonna get when you listen to a 21. You know what you're gonna get when you listen to a Future. You know what you're gonna get when you listen to a Kendrick. Like, and also you want that from them as well. Like a part of you, like even though you feel like oh it's bad, like a part of you like still wants to turn up to that music because it's
I
what
think
you want.
that's part of the question though, is like is that the artist's responsibility, you know, like
No,
you know, do you know what I mean? But I think some people think that it is. I mean,
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
think that I necessarily do, but I think some people definitely, especially like those crazy ass like conservative. Sorry, can I cuss on here? I forgot. Okay,
Do what you want.
those like crazy like conservative people who you remember when even like just like fun like ass shaking songs like WAP. Remember when WAP came out and all those crazy conservative people were like they're gonna ruin our children's minds and WAP this and WAP that. You know what I'm saying?
That's
Like
not about the artist though. Like if
I don't think it is either, but I'm saying
control your kids.
some people do think that is what I'm saying. Like some people do think that it's the artist's responsibility on like how they influence like the culture and children and the next generation and whatever.
Going back to Ice Cube, something that Ice Cube said when he was first getting popular, and they had to put parental advisories on everything. Like I remember that he mentioned that it's not the artist's responsibility to censor the music; it's the parents' responsibility to censor the content and the media that their children's consuming. If you're an adult, then your actions and the media that you consume, you're responsible for that. Like nobody's to blame for that. Now if you're a kid, like you're more likely to be influenced by somebody that you may respect or aspire to be like, but at the same time, like the artist isn't responsible for the message that child is receiving, because the artist isn't making music for like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old. A 12 or 13-year-old is going to go out of his way to listen to that music because it's the cool thing to listen to. Like a 12-year-old or a 13-year-old is going to go out their way to sneak into a rated R movie because it's the cool movie to watch. But
it kind of seems like you're saying it kind of seems like you're saying that role models aren't responsible for what how they come off as influences. That's kind of what it makes it seem like you're saying right there. When I don't necessarily agree with that.
I
What do you
think
say?
you could, from what he's saying, you could make that, you could draw that from that, but that's not what I got from it. Because in these examples, not everyone sets up to be a role model either. That's something that, you can't really impose on other people. But for someone who does set up to be a role model and they want to be that example for those young kids, okay, yeah, they should be more mindful of it because that's the audience that they're trying to cater to.
Isn't that those rappers though? Don't they kind of sort out to be those role models, or inexplicably those role models? Or
do you think
on accident, really? Role model? I can't hear you. Say that again.
Yeah, Youngboy.
Do you think Travis Scott wants to be a role model? Do you think that Soulja Boy wants to be a role model?
Do I think they want to be a role model? I think they are a role model by default because of what they do.
No, I'm asking you, do they want to be role models?
Oh, do they want to be? I have no idea. I doubt it. Maybe Soulja Boy, no. Travis Scott, I don't know. He has shoes, so who knows?
Like I think certain rappers, like a Chance the Rapper, who sets out to be a role model, who wants to be like a face of the community, then like yeah, clean up your image, like like do things for the community, like give a good message to people. Like that's what you say you do. That's what you like say you want to do. So do it. But if you're like a NBA Youngboy, or if you're like a Gunna or a Young Thug or 21 Savage, like you're like although they may donate to charity if they want to, or they may like donate to schools.
They're not out here like going and performing at like I don't know, like summer camp or
whatever, boys and girl clubs.
Like that's like stuff that like you would expect from like a Jay-Z or a Chance or a P Diddy, or like maybe even a Meek Mill, like. But so I mean, I can
Drake, I could definitely see Drake doing like a clean kids concert or some shit like that.
Yeah, so if you like want like Meek Mill to like like be more of a role model, I get that, because like he's kind of in that role. But if you want an artist who like you don't expect that from them, I don't think you should like put them in that light for them to do those things. It's kind of like pushing like another image on them that they're not.
I'm glad actually you mentioned India Youngboy, because recently there was a video he had done. I think he was IG Live or something. And he said, in order to, so this is kind of like addressing the violence point that Josh made earlier. He said, in order for you to, it takes a real man to kill another man. And so having that mindset, that mentality, you're making music that perpetuates that, because that's how you feel. And you're, like we said, art before is a reflection of, as a depiction of how you feel, your experiences. And so what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I mean, that's a hard question to answer, because I feel like for him and his life and his experiences, like, that's relevant, you know, like, to him and his life. But I don't know that he should be held responsible for, if like somebody hears that and is like, okay, yeah, now I believe that because I like him, so now I believe, like, you know, like, if I want to be like real, I should be able to kill somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
like, I don't know that he should be held responsible for that. Because if I'm thinking like from the perspective, like, I don't make music, like, I'm a traditional artist, like, I paint and stuff like that. So I'm thinking, like, if I paint something that has like some kind of violent imagery, or if I paint something with like nude people on it or something like that, and somebody takes that and interprets it a certain way and wants to take that as their own belief or their own whatever, like, that has nothing to do with me. You know, like,
I think that's different from actually rapping and actually talking about killing another human being.
That's true.
You know what I mean? Instead of like just interpreting, like, because I mean, I'm sorry, keep going.
Like, it's definitely wild to say that. Like, it takes a real person to kill another person or whatever he said. Like, but I don't think that he should be held responsible if his fans take that and run with it, you know? Because, like, I don't know, he's just a regular ass dude at the end of the day. Like, that's just what he believes. You know, regular people say wild shit all the time. So I don't know. I don't think we should take, I mean, obviously, like, us in this group, like, we're all grown adults, so nobody's gonna like hear him say that and be like, yeah, you know, that's true. Like, I should go and kill somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like, no, none of us are gonna sit here and think that. But like, I don't know. Like, I don't think that us as a society should hold so much weight to what these people are saying, because they're just cool. You know what I'm saying?
I agree with that.
Yeah, I think the media only has as much power as you give it. Like, and
celebrities too.
Yeah, celebrities as well. And if like you're consuming a certain,
that's the thing though. People give them a lot of power.
That's like, you know, like that's
I think that society as a whole, they give them a lot of power.
Yeah, and you think about a lot of people, they looked up to Kobe, for example. This is, I think, slightly unrelated, but to illustrate the point of admiration and looking up to individuals. A lot of people who didn't have father figures, for example, they cited him as like their main inspiration, who they looked up to, and like even people who did have their dads in their lives, they looked up to him a lot. The point is, a lot of people in the Black community looked up to Kobe Bryant
because their dads probably looked up to Kobe Bryant. So like, damn, that's my dad too long.
So it's like they have a lot of influence.
Yeah, I agree that they do have a lot of influence, but at the same time, like, whatever they do within their personal lives, like, that's on another person to not like, they're not holding a gun up to your head. You know what I mean? Like, Kobe Bryant got in trouble with his maybe. But Kobe Bryant got in trouble with his wife. You know what I mean? Like, he's not telling like every guy out here is like in order to be successful and be a millionaire, you got to do, like, that's not what he's saying. Like, if that's the message you get out of it, then cool. But I mean, like, that's like, that was just like a hiccup in his life. You know what I mean? Like, he's not being held responsible for every guy that then goes out and does something like that. You know?
Facts. Like, if somebody's dad, you know, some other famous dude with the wife cheated on his wife, and then someone's dad goes and cheats on their wife, that has nothing to do with the people who they're looking up to. You know, even if
you can't be like Kobe Bryant.
right.
I understand. I don't think they should be held responsible, but I do think that person should always watch what they're doing, because they always have that level of influence on basically what they do. Whether you're a hip hop star, basketball player, whatever you do, you still have that level of influence. So you should always watch what you say or what you do, because people can take it out of context because you're on a higher level of status in society because you've been put on a higher level of status because of what you do, whether it's because you're a basketball player, rapper, or so forth. So I'm not saying you're directly responsible, like, oh, he killed somebody, oh well, let's go to this rapper over here. Like, no, I'm not saying that, but just watch the influence. That's all I'm saying, you know.
I feel like I would feel more like if I was in a light like that all the time, I would feel more inclined to watch like my every word, like where I go, everything like that, just because I am like under like this magnifying glass in the public eye.
Especially if you know kids are watching you. But I think that just has to do with like personal, like your own personal sense of responsibility in a situation like that.
And
like,
your own
like
privacy as well.
Imagine someone like fucking like, if someone were to say, oh, like Kodak Black, like you should really watch what you say because like there's kids watching, you'd be like, I don't give a fuck, like I don't care.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, but like some people would keep that in mind, you know. So I think it's fuzzy, like depending on the type of celebrity that you're talking about. Like think about like, I don't know, like a Beyonce, like I don't really know anything about her personal life, you know, but like everything she does is like out in the public is like classy, like, you know, respected and shit like that. But then like, I don't know, there's people who don't care about that kind of stuff.
Except when she got cheated on by Jay-Z and then she turned it into a classy album.
Nah, she was classy the whole time. Remember when her sister beat up Jay-Z in the elevator? That was hilarious. Yeah,
I think Kodak is actually a good example about the violence point too, because there was a Breakfast Club interview that I saw a snippet of when I was preparing for this episode, and I actually saw what he was saying. You know, once he did his first stint in jail, I guess after he became famous, once he finished that, he moved to Calabasas because he was saying like what happened with XXXTentacion, for example. He said the people out there killed him. He says he didn't know if they were going to do it to him, for example, but that was a possibility. So that's why he left. And so with people, with them experiencing violence in the communities and stuff like that, a lot of rappers, they get killed in the cities. We spoke about this before, but the idea that the older ones, there's a different mentality. I think I was watching a Fat Joe interview. He was a podcast, and he was speaking with somebody. He was saying that they looked at rap music differently than the current generation does. They were looking at it as more so a way out of the environment they were living in. But the new age rappers, they gain prominence, they get the money, but they stay in the same environment, and ultimately it leads to their demise.
I got you. Des?
I'm not gonna lie, man. I like just listening to everything you guys say. I came in with the idea that this question was really subjective because, you know, I was looking at it more from like an abstract standpoint to where I feel like it could be both. I feel like, you know, the art itself can be a reflection of, you know, life, and then life at the same time can reflect, you know, art just based off of who the consumer is, and then of course who's, you know, who the you know, the creator or the artist is. But it's like, to tie into what you guys are saying, like, I also feel like you give a society too much benefit of the doubt. Because like when you guys were thinking about or when you guys was talking about just being role models, like the only thing I could think of was Charles Barkley. He had that Nike commercial. And he was like, I am not a role model. You guys got to think of how important that was, because that was during a time where Michael Jordan was like, that was when Michael Jordan was at the peak of Nike. Like all you know, all his success, all his accolades, like everything, and just where the Nike brand was going at the time. For Charles Barkley to come out and say something like that, like I would identify more with that, because, you know, not everybody is equipped to, you know, bear the burden of being a role model. Like that's just the reality of what is. And I feel like, you know, to obtain a certain amount of success and then have to sacrifice yourself to maintain that success based off of society's perception of you is a detriment to what you did to get there. Like, I think we see it so often to where, like, I don't know if you guys feel this way, but think about how great artists sound when they were underground. And then when they get the mainstream, you know, contract or whatever, and they have to, you know, meet these points in their contract where the album has to be a certain length, content has to, you know, appeal to, you know, the Hot 100 or things like that, then like the sound just is, I'm not gonna say it's distorted, but it's like, it's not true to the self. So, you know, I get where you guys are coming from, but I'm sorry, I get where you're coming from, Josh, but at the same time, like, I just don't think that people should look at, what's being said and then just consuming it as it is. Like, I think we should always take everything that's done with a grain of salt, because we're all human beings at the same day. Like, our critical thinking skills have to be just as sharp as the people that's, producing this art and producing this content. Like, we have to take what they say and then, decide if it fits our best interest or if it doesn't. Because I would say on the flip side, like, for me, should I have achieved the amount of success that I envisioned, like, I would feel indebted to kind of like pave the way for people who want to do the same thing that I do. Same way that I'm pretty sure that, like you guys said, Meek Mill feels indebted to, pave a way for the people who feel the same type of way about his music. But at the same time, like, that's his choice. Like, he's made the choice to conform to what, he has to become to be a benefit to society. Whereas, at the same time, like, 21 Savage, he's a benefit to society, whether you guys want to admit it or not. Or I'm sorry, not whether you guys want to admit it, but whether you want to acknowledge it or not. But at the same time, like, he is a reflection of his upbringing. He's a reflection of everything that he has, you know, essentially gone through in life. And I feel like for people to try and filter that is to try and, mold a person or change a person to be a part of a system that truly didn't care about them to begin with. Because at the end of the day, all of this comes back around to the system that we're all a part of. Like, I think it's asinine to slap a role model title on to someone just because they've reached a certain level of success. Like, at the end of the day, a role model is someone, and I actually Googled it because I was really conflicted about just the terms that are being thrown around. But a role model is a person whose behavior, example, or success is to be emulated by others, and especially younger people. We you were spot on with the a lot of things where, or I know Ant said it, parents are responsible for what their children consume. If your child is consuming these things, and they resonate with it, that's not the artist's fault. That's the parent's fault. If what they're consuming is, detrimental to their being, like, that's the parent's fault. Point blank, point blank. Period. Like, like you're saying, you have the parental advisory stuff now. Like, you have all these, checks and balances in place to ensure that this content is consumed by the right target audience. Once you put all those checks and balances in place and you push this art out, it's no longer the artist's responsibility to determine whose hands this art falls into. Like, that's not their responsibility. Their responsibility is to just produce the art that resonates with them, that essentially fills their being, makes them feel complete, per se. And I feel like that's where I thought this conversation was going to go, because I was just more or less going to come out and say, like, when I go to the Carson Museum, or when I go to, I was at a wedding back in October, and I was just more or less amazed by the architecture, all the art that was on the wall. But as I'm walking down on the hallway, I immediately can tell that this place used to be a former slave plantation, just based off of, the setup. And then I'm looking at all the pictures, and it's nothing but white men on the wall. And, like, even though I can take offense to that, I also look at the same time that, like, this art is just portraying what was at that time. Like, you can look at this art and you can immediately, attest to what the status quo was at that time. But you can also appreciate it at the same time, because there isn't really, like, there's no lying about it. Like, you can look at history and you can confirm it based off of what this art was showing you. The same way you can, fast forward to the 90s. Like, one thing I love about Nas is, like, when I listen to Nas, I feel like I'm in his shoes in the 90s. Also prefacing that, or, saying at the same time, like, I have no desire to live the life that he lived in the 90s, but he is so articulate in what he does in his art that you can literally feel, I don't know if you guys feel that way, but you can literally feel what he felt at the time when you're listening to that music. So I feel like, to kind of tie everything in, like, I feel like the question is very subjective, because it always depends on, what side of the pen you're looking at. If you're looking at it from the consumer side, or you're looking at it from the artist side, like, you're definitely going to come up with a lot more, you're going to come up with different answers, I guess you could say. Like, some people can, say that it is the artist's responsibility, but I don't necessarily feel that way. Like, I feel like the artist is only responsible for doing what makes them feel whole and complete. And whoever chooses to consume it, that's their, that's their responsibility to decide how they let it affect them.
I'm glad you mentioned another form of art, like physical visual art. And so I was also thinking about film as an art too. And so there's one of the things to negate the violence argument against, for example, we were talking about rap music earlier, is that there's a fascination that we tend to have as people with deviant things in nature. So that's why movies like Scarface and The Godfather, like the mob culture, is so popular among people. Like there's some innate fascination about it. I see this tweet that resurfaces from time to time again, and it's like it says me on the way to my 9 to 5 listening to music about flipping bricks and stuff like that. And it's like I don't think that that's part and parcel of hip hop music at all. I think that that's something that's innate to humans because we seem to be fascinated with those kinds of things. It's kind of like the Darth Vader effect. I forget which YouTuber came up with that idea, that concept. It was like when Darth Vader came out, people liked him, even though he was Anakin Skywalker. They liked him so much more than Anakin because he had an edge to him. It was on the darker side. And so I think that that's something that reflects something. It says a lot about us as a people, what we tend to gravitate towards, as opposed to saying that this is something that's influencing us. What are you guys' thoughts on? Go ahead, Des.
I was gonna say, before you switch it, I got to send you this video because I was watching this Star Wars video yesterday, and it's going to blow your mind how Anakin was actually, his path was always to go to the dark side. And before I go any further into it, like, just take what I said, like the content creator essentially was like, I'm gonna blow your mind, or I'm gonna completely change your view of Anakin transforming into Darth Vader. And he literally laid out like everything that had happened in Anakin's life, why he was always destined to become Darth Vader versus being, the chosen one. So I'm gonna send it to you after this, but you go ahead.
Yeah, don't forget. Write it down. But my question that I wanted to jump into next was, I didn't want to restrict this to strictly music. I know that was the center of most of our conversation here, and that's kind of like what first got my gears turning. But art is more than music. I think that we all know that's kind of like, well, you guys know better than anyone else. You guys are creators, visual artists, and musicians. In your case, Rome. But so, what are you guys' thoughts on art and life? Like, what's the relationship between those two as it pertains to other mediums such as film, such as poetry, such as visual art?
You first said the question earlier. We talked about it for a second. We didn't talk about it for too long, because we didn't want to, have the same conversation we're having right now. But I think it's mostly, at least like from my perspective as like a visual artist, I think that for the most part, that art will imitate life, and I think that's the case for a lot of artists that I know too. At least, especially for me, like when I create, a lot of the time I'm inspired by things that I see in my life and like experiences that I have or ideas that I have based on conversations and things like that. So my art is imitating what's going on in my life. Um, but I think it varies, like based off of what kind of art you're talking about. Because like we were talking about for music, a lot of the time like music does influence like the culture, or like fashion will influence the culture. So then in that way, life will imitate art, like there'll be fashion trends. And I mean, I see that as being art. So yeah, I think it's both in a way.
Or like even with like graphic design, like if somebody wants me to like do something branding wise, like they're probably gonna want me to pull from like what's already trending in the industry, and what's trending is usually like because of an aesthetic that um that's determined by like what everybody's wearing, or colors that everybody's like wearing, or artists that are like influencing like these things. So like you look at like right now, everybody's wearing like muted colors or nudes or something like that, and then you go back like a couple years and you see that that's probably like something that like Kanye had a hand in, like influencing everybody to go like with this pastel, like palette and these nudes and like very basic colors. But you can see now that it's kind of like the thing that every brand's doing. It's not just a hip hop thing. It's like from high end to streetwear. Like every brand's doing it right now because it's just like the industry standard now. It's just like the trend right now. So I feel like music does influence some things, but then fashion influences some things, and fashion bites from music, and music bites from fashion. And I think it goes in one big circle. I don't think like, and I think life has a huge part to do with it as well. But I think life usually like is what comes first at the beginning of it. Life is usually what comes first, and life influences like the musician or the art, and then it just goes in a circle, and then that art or music then influences life, and then that life influences art or music, and then it just keeps on like revolving in this circle.
So yeah, I like what you were saying about the fact that it was very cyclical in nature and how it tended to repeat itself. My great uncle, he used to work at like a high profile fashion store where they used to fit celebrities for suits. I think Ric Flair and a couple other high profile individuals used to go to back in the day. And one thing that he was saying is like he could see like over the years how the same things that were trending, like you would see them pop up again in the next decade. And it's like nothing really was being really created new inside of the fashion space. Like the things you're saying, like the muted colors, that may have been a thing in the 70s, for example, and then it would die down and then it would resurface again, and then it dies down and it resurfaces.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like it's a circle, everything just continues to repeat, and that repetitive cycle influences the next cycle.
One of the things I've always felt about art is that art has the ability to illustrate our feelings better for us than sometimes we do even ourselves. Like I think I speak for all of us when you find a song or a poem or something like that that perfectly speaks to you how you feel in a given situation or at a given time. And if I had asked you to sum it up or ask you, hey, how's everything going? How do you feel at this exact moment? And expect an honest answer, you would not have been able to give me one that was that good.
Yeah, there's a song I was listening to today. It like really got to me. It's called 41.
Shut up, bro.
I don't know if you ever heard
It's so annoying. Have you guys heard that song? I don't know.
No.
Where is the dude from? Like
it speaks to the heart.
Philippines or something? It's like it's so random. Like it's literally like this dude. I can't remember where he's from, but it's literally this dude, and he's just counting in the song. But it went viral, like viral. It has like millions of plays now. It's crazy.
Honestly, like she's not explaining in the best way because the song touches me. I think it's like a good song. Guy's kind of like a role model to me,
Is it the Asian guy that counts?
Yes.
Okay, I know who you're talking about.
It's this song right here. Desmond's already starting to well up in the eyes.
It was a meme that they had made around like election time, and they had him counting like the electoral ballots or the votes.
He would have been a trustworthy guy. We know he knows his math, at least simple addition.
Love it. Are any of you guys into poetry?
Not really. I mean,
Not really.
It's not really a poem. I read like Doug's Cousins
book,
but it wasn't really like poems. It was more just like I guess it was poems. I don't know. It was like short little like excerpts,
Mm-hmm.
It was a cool book, but I'm not like super into poetry. I never really like understood it. I don't. Maybe it's like above my like level of like connecting with art, But I feel like most poetry that I've read, I just don't get it. You know what I mean? I don't know. Like I can understand the gist most of the time, but it's not. I think I just connect to visual arts more. Like I really feel influenced by like paintings and drawings and videos and like fashion and things that I can see and touch and like really get the whole experience.
I think there's a poet by the name of Rudy Francisco. I believe this is his last name, and Dondre put me on to him. He has a book called what is it called? Is it a hydrogen? It's after one of the elements. I have to look this up.
Yeah, maybe I don't like poetry because I just haven't read the right poetry.
Yeah, I feel like there's like poetry. Like my friend always talks to me about this girl called like Rupi Kaur or something like that.
Yeah, girls love her.
And, like I mean, like I've read a couple of her poems, and I can see like why like she's to a lot of people.
Is it Zarya? Is it Zarya?
No, Nate.
Oh, I could see why it's Zarya with like poems. That's why I thought it was her.
The book by Rudy Francisco is Helium. That's the one that I have, and it's actually it's kind of similar to like what you were saying about how, or the phenomenon of happiness, how like women feel was Rupi Kaur, but he's speaking from like a guy's perspective and on certain things, and just like certain insecurities that people have. So the idea is helium is one of the most abundant elements. It is the most abundant element in the universe, I think. And what he writes poetry about is things that are common across the human condition that we think are integral to ourselves, and that we feel like we are the only ones that experience, such as fear, insecurities, the excitement over small things that occur in life, things that we overcome. We think that we're the only ones that experience that, but it turns out that everyone experiences those very same things. And I think if anyone's into poetry or is looking to get into it, I think that's a brilliant book for you to start. None of the poems are long either.
Yeah, it sounds interesting. I just looked it up on my phone so I could save it.
Yeah, I remember when I was in like grade school, my mom bought me a book because I used to when I first started making artwork, I was like drawing and painting and stuff like that, and I was like making like actual like physical like little sculptures and stuff like that, and my mom bought me this book, and she said it was kind of like to like write down like thoughts or whatever, and ended up becoming like a little poetry book that I ended up making, and I would just like I couldn't find a way to like just state how I felt like in a way where it was just like so blunt and blatant. So it just ended up becoming like super metaphorical and stuff. So in a way, like I connected with like poetry earlier on, uh, just because like some of the metaphors of that describe the way you felt and compared them to things that exist in real life. Like I related to that because it was like oh like I don't know how to say that, but like I get that, like I get that reference, or like I know that feeling, because when I would write I would do the same thing because I didn't know how to say it, so I would just like make a reference like connected to something else, you know, so that way I could like when I would try to get it out, you know, I could get it out in a way that felt grand enough, but also relatable enough. So whenever I read people's poetry, as long as it feels relatable to whatever the metaphor is that they're like, if it is like metaphors, you know, sometimes it's not. As long as it feels relatable to me, that's the big thing. It just has to feel relatable to me, because I know like earlier on when I got into poetry, I couldn't relate to a lot of the things that people said because sometimes it just didn't feel relatable. Like
yeah, and all the poetry that they give you in school is always like fucking old people like writing about shit that you don't understand.
Yeah.
Like duels at midnight and stuff.
Yeah, it's like what? Oh, like I don't even know what these people are talking about, or like they're talking about like riding their wagon into town and shit like that. Like I don't understand what that's. You know what I'm saying? I don't know. I think yeah. I think I don't know. I don't know anybody who that I know of that like their art form is like words or poetry. I don't know a lot of people like that. Like I know one person who's an author. My friend is here. She's pointing at herself. She said it's her. I never knew. I known her since like first grade. Now all of a sudden, really, that's crazy. Yeah. So I don't know. Like I feel like that's not super common. Like for people to create that way, but it is interesting though.
I know quite a few though. For example, Dondre and Leon, who are both frequent guests here on the podcast, and friends of mine, both of them have written poetry. And then, Rome, to your point about like writing, and I kind of suspected as much that you would have much more of an inclination towards poetry than Tanner would, because the fact that you rap, you're a musician, and so I feel like rap and poetry are almost inseparable. They're one and the same. I think that was made very evident by in 10th grade we had a class that we started for the first time ever by my English teacher. It was hip hop, verse, and poetry, and so we would listen to music and dissect it, and then we would also like write our own rhymes in class. And it was one of the dopest classes I've ever took. And we had one of the books we actually went over was Tupac's book of poetry. I don't know if you guys know he actually had one. It's The Roasted Goose from Concrete.
Wow.
We did a whole section on that, and it was really eye opening. I felt like once I started like in the class when we switch gears and start to focus on writing poetry, my rhymes would get better because it got me to see things from a different lens. and get more inspired by other things. Because like if you look at poetry, for example, it's very, there's a certain pattern to it, and very much so the same way as music is. But like the metaphors, I feel like my metaphors got better because it wasn't as cutting dry. It wasn't just saying things and being literal either. And it forced me to expand my vocabulary a lot too, because it was a class taught by an English teacher. Like, what did you expect? Of course, it's going to be stuff that pushes the boundaries and makes you think and step out of your comfort zone a little bit.
Yeah, and I feel like when you're surrounded by poetry and other people making poetry, it pushes you to be more creative as well. Because you see like like everything else that's being presented in front of you, and I feel like you feed off of that creative energy. The same way that you, Joshua, and Desmond feed off of each other, like in a podcast, because like somebody says something, you feed off of that, like that energy just goes. I feel like the same thing goes creatively, like maybe like within your example, like people like your peers probably like had some sort of influence in the content that you guys were like studying, probably had some sort of influence on making you like feel the need to like broaden your vocabulary or like be more creative within the metaphors you were using.
For sure. And like what you were just saying about the people that you're around, and then how I guess that pushes you a little bit is, I know that you guys are fairly connected within the art community yourself around here. Like we were talking a little bit before the podcast about the art shows, and I know that there was like tons of people, and like I think I ran into Matthew Pierce, and I didn't know that he was going to be at the show because I came to see like you guys, and it was like he was there too, and then it was like your friend Rain, and then there's all the other people. It's like the art community in the Hampton Roads area, like it's like in Norfolk, and like the ODU centric art community. It's like we're pretty tight knit, and so like you guys all drive and strive and push each other, and kind of like not in the sense of directly like you're not stealing from each other, but you guys are almost, it's a very close knit community, and you guys are,
and definitely inspired.
yeah, I think that's just the best way to put it.
Definitely, like especially like when you can have a good like method of communication, like from artist to artist, like it's really cool when I see my friends like posting their new art or like going really hard like with their art. That just makes me want to like go just as hard. And it's cool because a lot of the people in this community, like in this area, are really open about sharing like their processes and things like that. Like
Hmm.
I can't even remember what I hit him up about, but Rain had posted something really cool that he made, like some kind of something that he made, and I just hit him up and I was like, "Yo, like, how did you do this? Like, what was your process like in doing this? This is really cool and interesting." And he just like let me know, and like I've had people hit me up and be like, "Oh, what website do you use to make your T-shirts, or what kind of paint do you use, or how do you do this, or whatever?" And like
Hmm.
I would just let them know, because like I think that's how the community gets stronger.
I think what I was trying to say earlier is there's a definite sense of camaraderie. Like I really do like that, and you kind of what you were just saying about that is like you asked him what was his technique for that particular piece of work that he had put together, and there was no hesitation about it.
Yeah, ever. There never is. And like that's a weird thing with artists sometimes is like people really want to keep that kind of thing exclusive, but and I understand why to an extent, but like to me, I know that me as an artist, like what makes my art valuable and unique is like the creativity that I put into it. Like it doesn't matter if people know exactly how I did it because they'll never make the same thing, so who cares? Like I'm always open to helping other artists out because it's hard to find out, like especially small stuff like that, like as far as sourcing like distributors for like clothing and like picking your correct mediums and all that. Like why not just save somebody the time?
Yeah, I mean, and even look at some of the bigger examples of art, like Pablo Picasso. He wasn't the only person painting in a cubist style. Like that was something that other people did as well. He was the most notorious of them. He was probably the one who executed it the best, if you ask like art historians or anybody in art academia. But he for sure was not the only person painting in that style. Even to this day, some people still do it.
Yeah, definitely.
See anything else you guys want to add?
No, I think I've addressed all the points that actually I did. When I was speaking about R&B music, I hate to loop all the way back, but I kind of glossed over this. I'm not certain why I did, but about the R&B music and how music reflects life. And so I was thinking about how the music we listen to, it reflects the toxic relationships. And two songs in particular, there's Trey Songz Back Home. And so I'm going to pull the lyrics up and put them on the screen for you guys real quick. And it's this particular section where, like, the pre-chorus here, he's talking about cussing her out, hitting the side bitch, and then denying it. And then he's saying that if it's not love, why does he keep coming back? And it's like, yo, that's some toxic stuff. And then so it's another song too, Pussy Fairy by Jhene Aiko. And so she said, like the concept, once I heard this line, I thought about this and I was like, nah. She said, fuck all your free time. You don't need no me time. And it was just like, some people actually think like that. And I don't think that this is giving them validation for that, but this is actually some people's mentality towards relationships. I think R&B music, that's something that we gloss over a lot of times when we talk about the art reflecting life and life reflecting art discussion, as we did earlier. But I did think about that as I was preparing for this discussion.
I think it's funny that you put up lyrics.
I was prepared because I don't know if you guys have heard the song before, and I'm not going to play it for you.
I haven't heard the Trey Songz one, but I heard the Jhene Aiko one. I feel like that's direct correlation to what I was saying about violence, about people thinking the same way. But in this way, you talk about toxic relationships. I feel this kind of goes hand in hand, really. You don't think so?
I was gonna say I don't even know. Like you said that it influences the toxic relationships.
I feel like the people who are already doing it, it may serve as validation for them. I don't think it influences people to start. I mean, it possibly could. I don't know. But
that's where I was looking for validation. That's the word I was looking for. I was gonna say I don't think it influences them. I think people that are doing that type of shit in relationship, that's just their character. But
right,
to say that, I definitely think it could help validate their actions, which I mean, teach your own.
But I really think, but they've also, like, people have been begging for women to take them back after cheating on them R&B songs forever. Like that concept in itself isn't new, but in this particular take, like, I guess how Jhene Aiko, she was more upfront in, like, the way she presented it. It was very literal. I think that's more of a new school thing. But what I was saying is, like, what I was able to deduce from this is I don't think that this is art influencing life. I think this is life influencing art. And she may not even think that way. Trey Songz may not even think that way. But I think that those are real things that people really experience, and those are things that certain people can relate to. And so what people gravitate towards certain art forms, certain mediums, such as music. Like, I like music that I can relate to in one facet or another. And so if it's something that you've actually lived, like, it resonates with you a lot better, and you're able to, you probably appreciate the artwork a little bit more.
Okay.
I can agree with that.
Yeah, I was about to say I agree with that too.
What about you guys, Tanner and Rome?
I think I agree with that. That, like, your perspective will be different based on how you relate to the art, because, like you said, like, even the artists who created it, they might not even agree with how you interpret it. But that's just one of the things about art, though. I think, like, so much of it is just open to interpretation.
Like with R&B in particular, I feel like, because a lot of times they have writing credits. Like, you may have 13 people helping to write a song, and it may or may not describe what the artists themselves have lived and experienced. And I think with rap, it's a little bit different because there's like an implied belief that we think that the person is living that, like, they're rapping for themselves, but also people do have ghostwriters. Like, we've talked about that before. Yeah. So it's not always an exact reflection of the life that that person has lived, but it's kind of implied. But with R&B, there isn't that implication.
Who was that kid that was on the Genius interview? One of the super young.
Oh, Lil Teca.
Yeah. And they were going through his lyrics, and he was, like, talking about, like, pull up in a Lambo and a Ferrari, and then it cut to him, and he was like, I don't even know how to drive. And then he was talking about being he's like, yeah, I've never been to France. Like, every single line was just, like, not his life whatsoever. That was so funny.
Yeah.
They fact checked my man on the spot. Good God.
It was so funny. I can't even remember. He was like, just every single line. He was just like, yeah, I don't do that. Yeah, I actually don't do that. I don't even know how to drive. It was crazy.
I think that's kind of like what Ice Cube was getting into. In that specific example, it's a little bit more so of the fictional side, the storytelling, or just braggadocio, whatever the motivation behind it. But it wasn't him being giving a factual account of any kind. Which there are elements of both in the entirety of the hip hop catalog, rap catalog.
Would you say what he did was life reflected in art? Like him lying about how he actually raps?
That's a good question. That's a really good question. It certainly wasn't his life.
It's imitation.
Yeah, life
You can't
imitates
even,
art. That's basically
Yeah.
the same thing.
well, no, I'm just saying like that shit is just imitation. Like it's fraudulent. You can't even consider that shit art.
I think there's a distinction of what is art and what isn't, and I haven't been able to nail it down and come up with a concise definition or criteria for that. But I kind of,
Is it not art for somebody else though?
I mean, the one reason I'm a little bit hesitant to accept Dez's argument on that is because what if it does have like the rhyme scheme, the pattern, the way that he's like the way he curated his lyrics for that particular song, is that not artwork within itself, even though it is fraudulent? Like, is
And
there
if,
not elements of art to it?
and if he had
I
ghostwriters,
mean,
would you
look.
not think
If
it's
it
art?
makes him feel complete and whole, and he is able to achieve, stillness with himself by putting that, that out, then by all means it's art. But from my like I said, before I even gave my prior statement, like it's all subjective. It's like how you feel about it, and I feel that it's not art. So if you want to be objective, by all means, we can classify it as art. But me being subjective, I don't classify it as art.
To be clear, I wasn't defending him because I was a fan of his work or anything like
No,
that.
no.
It's just a genuine
Yeah,
question to be posed.
that's that's why I said objective. Like if you want to start talking about like, yeah, he understands beat patterns, he understands, how to, essentially create a song to make it art, then we can by all means, say it's art. But I wasn't saying like, I wasn't coming at you as if you're like defending them. Like I was more or less just saying that, if we want to be subjective about it, then yes, technically it's art. But I mean, if you want to be objective about it, then yes, technically it's art. But me just being subjective with it, like how I feel about it, I don't feel it's art. Like Gucci said, they said, damn, put his ass in the dirt, and he actually did it. Like me, like nah, I'm playing. Nah, I'm playing. I don't necessarily I don't condone violence up here. If my mom's watching, I have no idea who Gucci is or what he's talking about when he says that.
Did you have any thoughts on that, Rome?
You man?
Did you have any thoughts on that, on the fraudulence or whether or not there's art?
I mean, like, are you wanting me to defend Ice Cube as well, or?
No, I'm not asking you to defend anything. I'm just curious about your thoughts because I mean, I see what you're getting at too. Is like the idea of he was saying that not everything is to be taken literally because I mean that's the nature of rap. It's laden with metaphors. For example, like for you to say something, it could be a hyperbole, and for you to take it literally would be foolish. Like in the interview forms, for example, they had asked the interviewer should ask him if are you saying that it would be foolish for people to do what you say in your music, everything you said in your music, and the obvious answer he was like yes. So I think that's pretty much self-evident, but a lot of people don't grant hip hop or rap music itself that kind of grace, like from an outside perspective.
I don't think they do, but I mean, like, I think with hip hop, it's the same thing with any other genre. You have like main writer, you have ghost writers. Sometimes the producer probably even throws in like, "Yo, bro, it would sound dope if you said this," or like, "Yo, you should da 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 da." So it's like the artist relates to it in a certain extent, but at the same time, like going back to the sports, like they're expected, like the labels investing in them a certain amount of money. They're expected to do a certain amount of money, sell a certain amount of copies, be a certain type of celebrity. So they're like making these songs for them to be hits, so they're gonna say and do things in their music that they feel like is going to sell, and uh, I don't think that we should take it literal. Like it's meant to be entertainment, and although that entertainment influences some people, it's not meant to do that. It's just meant to entertain,
So rapping is like wrestling?
Yeah.
Like the WWE?
Wrestling is real, Josh.
All right, rapping is not real. Okay, gotcha. Okay. All right. Is there anything else you guys want to add?
I'm good on my end.
No. All right. Yeah, you got an album of the week, Des, or book of the week?
Yeah. My album of the week is actually Influence because I seen him in the barbershop yesterday. But it's gonna be Pusha T, King Push, Darkest Before Dawn, The Prelude.
All right. Cool. All right, you guys check it out. If you guys like the discussion, don't forget to hit the like button. And we're gonna see you guys next week. Peace.
But while you're here, be sure to check out other great content from the Breakdown crew, including previous episodes of the podcast, Joshua vs. Movies, Joshua vs. Music, and of course, haven't forgotten about my plant lovers, Feel the Love. Just check out this begonia.